Before the portals, before the Infinity Stones, before Marvel became a cultural giant, there was just a spark in the dark and a man building something out of nothing. In 2008, superhero movies weren't trusted. They weren't respected, and they definitely weren't seen as the future. Marvel was just a company on shaky legs, gambling everything on a character no one outside of comic book shops really cared about. And that gamble wasn't clean or guaranteed. It was loud, messy, and stitched together, with faith more than certainty. Tony Stark was never meant to be a symbol. He was flawed, abrasive, selfish, and all the things a hero traditionally wasn't. But maybe that's what made him perfect. When the world saw Robert Downey Jr. step into that role, something clicked. It wasn't just acting, it was resurrection. Both the actor and the character were rebuilding themselves in real time, and we got to watch it happen one spark at a time. There was no multiverse, no billion-dollar roadmap, no certainty that this would become anything more than one movie. But Iron Man was different. It didn't rely on legacy or nostalgia, it relied on character. On pain, on humor, on the rawness of a man waking up to the damage he caused and deciding to be better. That choice to change, to take responsibility, is what pulled audiences in, and what kept them there long after the credits rolled. And then came the whisper that changed the entire language of cinema. Nick Fury stepped out of the shadows and casually mentioned something that would become everything. The Avengers Initiative. That one scene wasn't just a tease, it was a promise. That stories could connect, that characters could collide, and that heroes didn't have to stand alone. From that point on, Iron Man wasn't just a movie, he was the start of something massive, something meaningful, something mythic. In this video, we're exploring how Iron Man 1 did the impossible and created a legacy that reshaped modern storytelling. We'll dive into the risks that nearly destroyed it, the character work that gave it heart, and the small moments that became turning points for an entire universe. This isn't just a trip down memory lane, it's a look at the day Marvel quietly changed everything, and why that moment still echoes in every story that came after. In 2008, nobody believed Marvel could pull it off. They were bankrupt in the 90s, mocked by studios, sold off in pieces just to stay alive. And now here, they were betting everything on a B-list hero in a metal suit. They had no Spider-Man, no X-Men, no safety net, just Tony Stark, a risky idea and a hope that audiences would care. There was no formula, no shared universe, just raw ambition and a camera pointed at something untested. Robert Downey Jr. wasn't the safe choice either. He was brilliant, but broken talented, but tarnished by years of scandal and addiction. Casting him was bold, maybe even reckless. But in hindsight it was perfect, because Iron Man needed to be someone with a past, someone whose flaws were part of the story, not hidden behind a mask. Downey didn't just play Tony Stark, he embodied him, and in doing so redefined what a superhero could look like. Everything about that film felt different. There was grit and grime, there was humor that didn't feel forced, and a sense of reality that grounded the fantasy. We weren't watching gods and monsters, we were watching a man who built something with his bare hands and used it to become better. It felt human, it felt earned, and that made it unforgettable. Iron Man wasn't made in a lab by executives. It was built in the dark under pressure, with sparks flying and the clock ticking. And just like that first suit, it shouldn't have worked, but it did. And the world would never be the same again. Tony Stark wasn't born a hero. He was arrogant, selfish, brilliant, and blind to the consequences of his own power. He sold weapons, smiled in boardrooms, and lived without looking back. But all of that shattered when he saw his name on the side of a missile aimed at innocent lives. In that cave surrounded by death and betrayal, Tony Stark died and Iron Man was born. The transformation wasn't instant. He still stumbled, still made mistakes, still clung to ego and wealth, but something had changed. He saw the world differently, and more importantly, he saw himself differently. He wasn't building suits to show off anymore, he was building suits to take responsibility. Every arc reactor, every upgrade, was a confession, a promise to be better. What makes his journey compelling isn't just the tech or the wit, it's the guilt. The constant weight of what he created and what it cost. He never forgot the lives that were lost because of his inventions. He carried them in his chest, next to the thing keeping him alive. And that pain is what drove him to keep evolving. Tony didn't become Iron Man to save the world, he became Iron Man to make up for the part he played in breaking it. And in doing so, he inspired an entire generation of heroes and fans who saw that redemption is messy, but possible. Nobody in 2008 thought they were watching the start of a universe. They thought it was just a cool action movie with a great actor and some slick armor. But that post-credit scene changed everything. Nick Fury stepped out of the shadows and spoke 6 words that rewired the entire industry. You think you're the only superhero. That moment wasn't just fan service, it was a quiet revolution. It planted the idea that maybe these stories weren't islands, maybe they were threads in a larger tapestry. And Marvel didn't shout it from the rooftops, they whispered it and let the curiosity grow. It was subtle, it was confident, and it was genius. Suddenly, Iron Man wasn't just Iron Man. He was the first brick in a structure that would become the MCU. His choices, his failures, his victories would ripple through dozens of stories and change how we connect to characters. The universe didn't revolve around him, but it began with him, and that gave everything that followed a kind of gravity. Every franchise today owes something to that decision. To build a world where stories connect, where choices matter, and where heroes are allowed to grow. Iron Man didn't just launch a brand, he sparked a belief that superhero films could be more than explosions. They could be a universe. Iron Man's legacy isn't just in the box office numbers, or the merchandise, or the memes. It's in the emotional blueprint he left behind. He wasn't perfect, and that's why we loved him. He showed us that growth is painful, that heroism is messy, and that sacrifice means something. His story didn't follow a clean arc. It twisted and cracked and stumbled until it became unforgettable. Tony Stark taught us that you don't have to start as the best version of yourself to end up doing something extraordinary. You just have to make the choice to change, and then fight like hell to stay on that path. He failed over and over, and every time he used it to get stronger. Not for glory, but for purpose. Even after he was gone, his shadow shaped everything. Peter Parker carried his lessons, Wakanda adapted his technology, and the Avengers never stopped feeling the hole he left behind. His death wasn't just the end of a character, it was the end of an era. And it hit because we watched him earn every second of it. Iron Man didn't just save the world in Endgame. He saved Marvel. He made them matter. And he did it by bleeding for a universe that once felt like a long shot. There's something tragic about how it all began. A man kidnapped by terrorists, forced to face his sins, builds a suit, not to escape, but to redeem. Tony Stark was created in captivity by people who only saw him as a means to an end. And while he broke free, the truth is, he never stopped being trapped. Trapped in expectations and guilt, in the weight of responsibility he never truly asked for. Marvel built a franchise on his back, and as it grew, so did the burden. Tony was the heart and the shield, the mentor and the martyr. Everyone leaned on him, and he never stopped trying to be enough. But being enough broke him in ways he never showed. He hid behind jokes, behind tech, behind glass towers. But inside he was still in that cave, still scared, still building armor to hide the cracks. And maybe that's the most human thing about him. That even with all the genius and power, he still felt alone, still doubted, still needed connection. His story is filled with battles and quips and upgrades, but beneath it all is a man trying to find peace, and never quite getting there. Iron Man's story is a triumph, but it's also a tragedy. And maybe that's why it lasts. Because behind the suit was someone who never stopped trying, even when it hurt. May 2nd, 2008 wasn't just the release of a superhero movie, it was the start of something no one could predict. A character from the comic book sidelines stepped onto the screen and changed how we tell stories. Iron Man wasn't just a film, it was a declaration. That heroes could be flawed, that universes could be built, and that redemption could be louder than revenge. For old fans, it was a reward. A deep emotional dive into a character they never thought would get this kind of spotlight. For new fans, it was an invitation. A front row seat to the most ambitious narrative experiment ever attempted on screen. And it all started with a man in a cave building something from scraps. Every great moment that came after owes a piece of its soul to that first spark. The Avengers, assembling the portals, opening the final snap. None of it exists without Tony Stark. Without his pain, his growth, his sacrifice. Without that first step into the light wearing metal and carrying guilt like a second skin. So when people ask when did Marvel become what it is today, the answer is simple. It was the day Iron Man took flight. That was the moment everything changed. Quietly, forever.